If you're in ministry, if you're a pastor, if you're an elder, if you're a marriage ministry person, anywhere in leadership, you will hear the pain of the sin of withholding. They'll say to you, I'm suffering. I'm unloved. I feel unwanted. I feel alone. And now you can have a tool to hand to them, and you can be intelligently ministering to them. This can help you put the pieces together for some of the couples who are really hurting and in pain in your congregation, in your cell group, in where you lead. Healing Time is about equipping you so that you can have more information and more tools to be a blessing to those who are actually suffering. And when you're being neglected like this, you suffer. Now let's go to the New Testament and look at another example of the sin of withholding in Acts chapter 5. Now let me read this to you. Now a man named Ananias, together with Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back. Now, he withheld part of the money for himself, but brought the rest of it and put it at the apostles' feet. Then Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart? Now that's a powerful statement right there. So filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and kept for yourself some of the money you received from the land. Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, was the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing that you have not lied just to human beings, but also you've lied to God? Now, when Ananias heard this, he fell down and died. And great fear seized all who heard what had happened. Then some young men came forward, wrapped up his body, and carried him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her, tell me, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land? Yes, she said. That is the price. Peter said to her, how could you conspire to test the Spirit of the Lord? Listen, the feet of the men who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out also. At that moment, she fell down at his feet and died. The young men came in and, finding her dead, carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear seized the whole church and all who heard about these events. Now, this is really a sad story about withholding. They didn't have to withhold. And if you're in marriage, you don't have to withhold. You have endless resources in the Spirit of God. You have the fruits of the Spirit. You have the Holy Spirit who is endlessly able to love. You have the wealth of intimacy and connection and romance and sensuality. But are you withholding it? Okay, they didn't have to withhold in the story, but withholding then led to lying. And this happens in marriage. No, I didn't mean to do that. No, it's your fault. Well, I have an excuse for why I didn't touch you. I have an excuse for why I'm not nurturing you. I have an excuse for not being romantic. I'm busy, right? These are excuses. These are called lies, which then led to both of them dying. Now, I know this is a drastic example of what the sin of withholding can do. And if you're married to someone who's actually withholding from you, it is so very painful. When you withhold, you can actually lie to yourself. That's called self-deception. Then lie to others about your sin and pretend you're this great person at church, but at home you're not that great person. This pattern can lead to death inside the marriage, or actually all by itself over time, and it takes time. It might take 1, 2, or 3 decades. Create enough deprivation and pain to actually kill a marriage. And I'm not talking about any marriage. I'm talking about Christian marriages. And when we withhold, we have to justify why we don't show up with our best, with all of our heart. And sadly, the first commandment to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind is a command not to withhold from God, to give Him everything, to pour all of our praise and worship out to Him. Those that tend to struggle in so many areas of their lives who withhold. Now, as you start a group on the sin of withholding, or you just go through this teaching all by yourself, a veil can literally be removed from your eyes, leading us to a much better life inside a marriage. A marriage without the sin of withholding is so much healthier. There is something about the sin of withholding that allows us to treat others poorly and justify why we're doing it. I have seen this teaching turn the light bulbs on some people's lives and actually save the relationship, because the sin, without a name, it couldn't be repented of, it couldn't be healed from, a light couldn't be put on it. Now you can become a resource for others, and you can do this individually. Of course, you and your spouse can do this at home. You can talk about it. You can see if it's happening in your relationship. And that's a great use of your time. It's a great use of the product of sin of withholding. But you know where I'm going to go. This is healing time. And it's not just you that's suffering. And if you've never suffered with this, you're also a candidate. You can let your pastor know that you want to help people who are struggling with the sin of withholding, who are depriving their marriages. You want to give them tools to help one another. And in the sin of withholding, you can give those tools to people. And you can see their marriage begin to move from that dry, lonely, irritated, frustrated, kind of tight place to this very open and giving and loving and organic place. I've seen thousands of couples heal from the sin of withholding. It's miraculous. It's a process. It's a process that you could learn and teach, whether you've ever suffered with this or not. And get this to your pastor as well. Trust me. If you go to your pastor today and say, have you met with any couples who are struggling, feeling alone in their marriage, feeling unwanted, not having any physical intimacy or very little? He's going to tell you yes. And you can volunteer. Say, listen, I want to take care of those sheep. I want to do this program called Sin and Withholding. I want to go over so many weeks with this with them and see if we can help them resurrect life in their marriage. That's what healing time is. It's not just healing one. It's using these tools to heal the many in your church. I believe the stronger the church, the better every life can be in that church. So please open your heart, open your home, and do a sin of withholding opportunity for those that are struggling.